The rain hammered down on the streets of Virginia Beach as Marcus Thompson walked out of the grocery store, his arms loaded with bags. He had just finished a grueling 6-month deployment with SEAL Team 4 and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a few scattered vehicles glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. Marcus had always been different from other kids growing up. While his friends played video games, he spent hours swimming in the ocean, pushing his body to its limits. His father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught him that strength came not from muscles alone, but from the mind's ability to endure when the body wanted to quit. Those lessons had carried him through BUD/S training, where only 20% of candidates made it to graduation. As he approached his pickup truck, something felt wrong. His instincts, honed through countless missions in hostile territories, were screaming at him. 3 men emerged from behind a van parked nearby. They weren't there by accident. Marcus could tell from their positioning, the way they moved with practice coordination, that this was planned. The largest of the 3 stepped forward, his face partially hidden beneath a baseball cap. "Nice truck," he said, but his tone suggested he wasn't interested in small talk. Marcus set his grocery bags down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening while his mind calculated distances and angles. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through his veins. He had faced Taliban fighters in Afghanistan mountains and pirates off the Somali coast, but there was something unsettling about confronting danger on home soil, in a place where families shopped for milk and bread. The second man, wiry with nervous energy, pulled out a knife. The blade caught the light as he flipped it open. "Keys," he demanded. "Wallet. Phone. Everything you got." Marcus had been trained to assess threats instantly. The knife wielder was jumpy, probably high on something. The big one was the muscle, confident in his size advantage. The third man, hanging back near the van, was the wild card, possibly armed, definitely the lookout. In combat zones, Marcus would have had his team, his weapons, clear rules of engagement. Here, he was alone, unarmed, operating under civilian law. "Listen," Marcus said, raising his hand slightly, "you don't want to do this. Take the truck if you need it, but let's not make this worse than it needs to be." The big man laughed. "Worse? You think you're in a position to negotiate?" He took a step closer, close enough that Marcus could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne. "Maybe we take more than just your stuff. Maybe we teach you a lesson about walking around like you own the place." Years of training kicked in. Marcus recognized the setup. They were trying to intimidate him into compliance, but their body language suggested they were prepared for violence. The knife wielder's hand was shaking slightly, adrenaline or drugs making him unpredictable. The big man's weight was shifted forward, telegraphing aggression. The lookout had moved to block any escape route to the store. "I'm going to reach for my wallet," Marcus said slowly. "It's in my back pocket." He needed to de-escalate if possible, but every warrior instinct told him this was going to go bad. As his hand moved toward his pocket, he spotted what he was looking for. The security camera mounted on the light pole was pointed directly at them. Whatever happened next would be recorded. The knife wielder stepped closer, eager to grab the wallet. It was the mistake Marcus had been waiting for. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the man's wrist, twisted sharply, and drove his knee into the attacker's solar plexus. The knife clattered to the wet pavement as the man doubled over, gasping for air. The big man charged, throwing a haymaker that would have knocked out most people. But Marcus wasn't most people. He slipped the punch, using the attacker's momentum against him, and delivered a precise elbow strike to the temple. The man staggered but didn't go down, his size and anger keeping him in the fight. The third attacker had produced a crowbar and was circling, looking for an opening. Marcus kicked the fallen knife away and squared up, his muscle memory from thousands of hours of close-quarters combat training taking over. He had been taught to end fights quickly and decisively, but he was also acutely aware that excessive force could land him in legal trouble. Every strike had to be justified as self-defense. The man with the crowbar swung wildly. Marcus ducked under it, grabbed the weapon hand, and executed a textbook armbar that sent the attacker face first into the asphalt. The big man had recovered and came at him again, this time more cautiously. Marcus feinted left, then delivered a liver shot that dropped the man to his knees, his face contorted in pain. The knife wielder had gotten back to his feet and was reaching for something in his waistband. Marcus didn't wait to see what it was. He closed the distance with 2 quick steps and applied a rear naked choke, careful to use only enough pressure to render the man unconscious without causing permanent damage. Within seconds, the attacker went limp, and Marcus lowered him to the ground. The sound of sirens in the distance told him someone had called 911. The big man was trying to crawl away, while the one with the crowbar was groaning and holding his arm. Marcus pulled out his phone and called 911 himself, clearly stating his name and that he had been attacked and defended himself. He knew the importance of being the first to report, to establish himself as the victim rather than the aggressor. As he waited for the police, Marcus secured the weapons and checked each attacker for serious injuries. His training had taught him that the fight wasn't over until authorities arrived. He took photos of the scene with his phone, documenting the weapons and the positions of the attackers. His shirt was torn, and his knuckles were scraped, but otherwise he was unharmed. The police arrived within minutes, followed closely by an ambulance. Marcus kept his hands visible and followed every instruction to the letter. He had seen too many situations escalate because someone made sudden movements around nervous cops. The officers took his statement while the paramedics tended to the attackers. Detective Sarah Chun arrived on scene shortly after. She was a veteran cop who had seen plenty of assault cases, but something about this one stood out. The precision of the defensive strikes, the way the victim had controlled 3 armed attackers without using excessive force. It spoke of serious training. "Mr. Thompson," she said, reviewing his driver's license. "That was quite impressive. Mind telling me what you do for a living?" "I'm in the Navy," Marcus replied simply. He had been taught operational security from day one. Never volunteer information about being a SEAL unless absolutely necessary. Detective Chin nodded, making notes. The security footage would tell the story clearly enough. 3 armed men attacking 1 unarmed man who defended himself with remarkable skill. She had seen the Navy base sticker on his truck and could make educated guesses about what kind of sailor could handle himself like that. The attackers were loaded into ambulances, none with life-threatening injuries, but all requiring medical attention. Marcus gave his full statement, explaining how he had tried to de-escalate, how they had produced weapons, how he had feared for his life. Every word was true and carefully chosen. As the scene was cleared, Marcus finally loaded his soggy groceries into his truck. The milk was probably spoiled, and the bread was definitely squished, but he was alive and uninjured. He had survived IED explosions and firefights in distant countries, but somehow this felt different. This was home. This wasn't supposed to happen here. He drove back to his apartment, his hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline crash hitting his system. His phone buzzed with texts from his teen girlfriend, who had seen the police activity on a local news app. He sent quick reassurances that he was fine, knowing he would have to explain everything later. In his apartment, Marcus finally allowed himself to process what had happened. He poured a glass of water and stood at his window, looking out at the city lights. In combat, there were clear enemies and rules of engagement. Here, the lines were blurrier. The attackers were probably desperate, maybe addicted, certainly making bad choices. But they had chosen to threaten him with deadly weapons, and he had responded with the skills that had been drilled into him through years of training. He thought about the investigation that would follow. There would be questions about his level of force, about his background, about why a single man could defeat 3 armed attackers. The security footage would be his best defense, showing clearly that he had been attacked and had responded proportionally. But he knew that once authorities started digging into his background, they would quickly discover he wasn't just any sailor. The truth was, Marcus was one of the most highly trained warriors in the American military. He had completed operations in countries that would never appear in newspapers, had saved lives, and taken them when necessary, had pushed his body and mind beyond what most people thought possible. But tonight, He had just been a guy buying groceries who defended himself when attacked. As he prepared for bed, Marcus made a mental note to contact JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office, first thing in the morning. They would want to know about the incident, and he would need legal guidance as the case progressed. He also needed to inform his commanding officer, though he dreaded that conversation. SEALs were supposed to maintain a low profile, and this incident would definitely draw attention. Sleep came fitfully that night. Marcus's dreams were filled with the faces of the attackers, mixed with memories from deployments overseas. He woke several times, his body ready for threats that weren't there. It was a familiar feeling, the hypervigilance that came after violence, even justified violence. The next morning brought a new complication. Marcus's phone rang early, the caller ID showing a blocked number. Only a few people had his personal cell, and even fewer would call from a blocked line. He answered cautiously. Petty Officer Thompson. The voice was crisp, professional, unmistakably military. Yes, sir. This is Commander Williams from Naval Special Warfare Command. We need to discuss last night's incident. Are you able to come to base within the hour? Marcus's stomach tightened. Word had traveled up the chain of command faster than he expected. Yes, sir. I'll be there. As he dressed in his service uniform, Marcus wondered how far this would go. The attackers had been common criminals, not terrorists or foreign agents. There was no national security angle, no classified operation to protect. But he had used skills taught to him by the Navy to defend himself, and now the Navy wanted answers. The drive to Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek was familiar, but today it felt different. The guards at the gate seemed to look at him longer than usual, though that might have been his imagination. He parked outside the Special Warfare Command building and took a deep breath before entering. Commander Williams was waiting in a conference room, along with a JAG officer, and someone Marcus didn't recognize, a civilian in an expensive suit who introduced himself only as Mr. Johnson for Washington. The presence of a civilian official raised Marcus's concern level significantly. Petty Officer Thompson, Commander Williams began. First, let me say we're glad you're unharmed. However, this incident has raised some concerns that go beyond a simple mugging. Marcus remained at attention. Sir, the civilian, Johnson, opened a folder. The 3 men who attacked you weren't random criminals. 2 of them have connections to a larger organization we've been monitoring. Nothing terrorist-related, he added quickly, seeing Marcus's expression, but organized crime with international reach. This changed everything. Marcus had thought he was dealing with opportunistic criminals, but if there were larger implications, his actions might have inadvertently exposed ongoing investigations or made him a target. What do you need from me, sir? Marcus asked. Commander Williams leaned forward. For now, we need you to proceed with the legal process as normal. File your reports, cooperate with local police. But we're assigning you a security detail, just as a precaution. And Petty Officer, he paused, choosing his words carefully. The Admiral wants to see you tomorrow. Clear your schedule. Marcus's mind raced. Which Admiral? Why would flag rank leadership be interested in what seemed like a straightforward self-defense case? The mention of organized crime connections suggested this went higher up the chain than anyone initially thought. The JAG officer spoke up. I'll be handling your legal representation. The security footage clearly shows self-defense, and the prosecutors are already indicating they won't file charges against you. The 3 attackers, however, are facing significant time. Armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon. They're looking at years. There's one more thing, Johnson added. The local media has picked up the story. Navy sailor fights off 3 armed attackers makes for compelling news. We're managing the narrative, keeping your SEAL status under wraps, but you should be prepared for attention. Marcus nodded. This was exactly what he had hoped to avoid. SEALs operated in the shadows by design. Public attention was antithetical to their mission. But he had been forced to defend himself, and now the consequences were rippling outward in ways he couldn't control. The meeting concluded with specific instructions: maintain normal routine, report any unusual activity, and be ready for the Admiral's meeting tomorrow. Marcus was given a phone number for the security detail and told they would be discreet but present. As he left the building, Marcus noticed a subtle change in his surroundings. A car that had been parked when he arrived was still there, engine running. A jogger seemed to be taking an unusually long time, stretching near the parking lot. His security detail was already in place, and they weren't being as discreet as promised. The drive home was surreal. Marcus had operated undercover in hostile nations, had infiltrated terrorist cells and criminal organizations. But this was different. This was his home, his normal life, being invaded by the shadowy world he usually kept separate. His apartment felt less secure now. Marcus did a thorough check, looking for signs of entry or surveillance devices. It was probably paranoia, but paranoia had kept him alive in places where death came quickly to the careless. He found nothing, but the feeling of being watched persisted. That evening, Detective Chun called with an update. The three attackers were all in custody, recovering from their injuries. They had extensive criminal records, and the one with the knife had outstanding warrants in 3 states. But more interesting were their connections. They were low-level muscle for an organization involved in drug trafficking and extortion. "Mr. Thompson," she said carefully, "I've been instructed to share this information with you by federal authorities. It seems you stumbled into something bigger than a simple mugging. These men may have targeted you specifically, though we're still investigating why." Marcus thanked her and ended the call. Targeted specifically? That changed the entire dynamic. Random crime was one thing, but if someone had sent these men after him, it meant his identity as a SEAL might have been compromised. It meant someone saw him as a threat or an opportunity. He spent the evening reviewing his recent activities, trying to identify any operational security breaches. Had he been followed from base? Had someone identified him from previous deployments? The possibilities were numerous and troubling. His SEAL training had prepared him for many things, but the intersection of his military life and civilian world was proving more complex than any mission briefing had covered. Tomorrow's meeting with the Admiral would hopefully provide answers, but Marcus had a feeling it would only deepen the mystery. As night fell over Virginia Beach, Marcus stood at his window again, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Somewhere out there, forces were in motion that he didn't fully understand. The simple act of defending himself had triggered something larger, and he was now caught between worlds, the shadows where SEALs operated and the harsh light of public scrutiny. His phone buzzed with a text from his team leader. "Heard about last night. Watch your 6, brother." Marcus smiled grimly. Watching his 6 was second nature. But now he had to watch it at home, in the places that were supposed to be safe. The war had followed him home in a way he never expected, and tomorrow's meeting with the Admiral would likely reveal just how deep this rabbit hole went. The rain had started again, pattering against his window like distant gunfire. Marcus checked his locks one more time, placed his phone where he could reach it quickly, and tried to get some sleep. Tomorrow would bring answers, or perhaps more questions. Either way, he would be ready. In the darkness of his room, Marcus reflected on the thin line between soldier and civilian, between the world of special operations and normal life. He had crossed that line last night, using skills meant for battlefields on a grocery store parking lot. Now he had to navigate the consequences, both legal and operational. The Admiral's interests suggested this went beyond a simple assault case. Marcus had inadvertently stepped into something larger, and his actions had sent ripples through both criminal and military hierarchies. As sleep finally took him, one thought persisted. In the world of special operations, there were no coincidences. If he had been targeted, someone would pay for that mistake. The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval amphibious base as Marcus arrived for his meeting with the Admiral. He had barely slept, his mind churning over the implications of yesterday's briefing. The presence of federal investigators and mentions of organized crime had transformed a simple self-defense case into something far more complex. The Admiral's office was in the secure wing of the command building, requiring multiple badge swipes and a Marine Guard verification. Marcus had been here only once before, during a classified briefing about an operation that officially never happened. The corridor was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of boots on polished floors. Admiral James Mitchell was a legend in the naval special warfare community. A former SEAL himself, he had led teams in Vietnam, commanded during Desert Storm, and now oversaw all West Coast special operations. His office walls were notably bare of the usual military memorabilia. Those who knew him understood he preferred to keep his achievements in the shadows where they belonged. Petty Officer Thompson, the Admiral said, rising from behind his desk. His handshake was firm, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. Please sit. Marcus took the offered chair, noting that Mr. Johnson from yesterday was also present, along with a woman he didn't recognize. She wore civilian clothes, but carried herself with military bearing. This is Agent Sarah Blackwood from NCIS, the Admiral said. She's been investigating the organization connected to your attackers for the past 18 months. Agent Blackwood opened a laptop, turning it so Marcus could see the screen. What do you know about the Kozlov Syndicate, Petty Officer Thompson? The name was vaguely familiar. Marcus had seen intelligence briefings about various criminal organizations during deployments, particularly those involved in arms trafficking that might supply terrorist groups. Russian-originated, expanded into the U.S. about 10 years ago. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking. We got some briefings about their possible connections to insurgent groups in Afghanistan. Correct, Blackwood said. What you might not know is that they've been actively trying to recruit or compromise military personnel, particularly those with special operations training. They offer big money for information, training, or even direct action. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. You think they were trying to recruit me? Admiral Mitchell leaned back in his chair. We're not sure, but the timing is suspicious. You just returned from a deployment where your team intercepted a weapons shipment that cost the Kozlov Syndicate approximately $30 million. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The deployment had been classified, a joint operation with DEA and CIA to intercept arms shipments in the Persian Gulf. Marcus's team had fast-roped onto a cargo ship in international waters, securing weapons that were supposedly bound for Yemen, but had connections to criminal networks stretching back to Eastern Europe. The 3 men who attacked you, Johnson interjected, were all low-level muscle for Kozlov operations in Virginia. We don't think they knew who you were specifically, but someone higher up in their organization did. The question is whether they wanted to eliminate you as revenge, or whether this was a botched attempt at something else. Agent Blackwood pulled up photos of the 3 attackers, along with their criminal histories. These aren't the kind of men Kozlov would normally send after a SEAL. They're street-level thugs, used for intimidation and collections. If Kozlov wanted you dead, they have access to much more capable assets. So what do you think happened? Marcus asked. Our working theory, the Admiral said, is that someone in the Kozlov organization identified you as being involved in the Persian Gulf operation. They put out word to their street crews to look for an opportunity. These 3 idiots thought they were just robbing a sailor for some extra cash and maybe earning points with their bosses. But they had no idea they were attacking a SEAL, Blackwood added. Your response was unexpected. And now Kozlov has a problem. Their operation has been exposed, 3 of their men are in custody, and there's media attention. Marcus processed this information. What's my status, sir? Am I compromised? The Admiral's expression was grave. Your name hasn't been released to the media yet, but it's only a matter of time. The court proceedings will be public record. We're working on keeping your SEAL status classified, but Kozlov already knows Marcus finished. Almost certainly. Which brings us to why you're here. The Admiral stood and walked to the window, looking out at the base. We have an opportunity to turn this to our advantage. Kozlov will be watching you now, trying to assess the damage, possibly planning their next move. We want to use that. Agent Blackwood took over. We've been trying to penetrate Kozlov's organization for over a year without success. They're paranoid, careful, and brutal to anyone they suspect of being law enforcement. But now they've inadvertently created a connection to you. You want to use me as bait, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. More than that, Johnson said. We want to create a narrative that serves our purposes. The media story will be that a Navy sailor defended himself against 3 attackers. But through certain channels, we'll let it leak that this sailor might be sympathetic to financial opportunities. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. You want me to play a corrupt SEAL? Admiral Mitchell returned to his desk. I know it goes against everything you stand for, Thompson, but this organization has been funneling weapons to terrorist groups, trafficking in human beings, and corrupting military personnel across all branches. You have a unique opportunity to help us take them down. What would this involve exactly? Marcus asked, his tactical mind already running through scenarios. Blackwood pulled up a complex organizational chart. Kozlov's Virginia operations are run by a man named Viktor Volkov. He's careful, rarely meets anyone in person, conducts most of his business through intermediaries. But he has a weakness. He's fascinated by American special operations. Collects memorabilia, reads every book, watches every movie. He'd jump at the chance to have a real SEAL in his pocket, Johnson added, especially one who had cost him $30 million and might be turned into an asset. Marcus studied the chart, noting the connections between various criminal enterprises. This was far more complex than a simple drug operation. Kozlov had tentacles reaching into legitimate businesses, law enforcement, even some military contractors. What's my cover story? He asked, already knowing he would accept the mission. The Admiral smiled grimly. You're frustrated with Navy pay, tired of risking your life for a government salary while criminals get rich. The attack rattled you, made you realize how vulnerable you are financially. You've got gambling debts, we'll create a paper trail, and you're looking for a way out. We'll assign you a handler from NCIS, Blackwood said. Someone who can guide you through the investigation protocols and make sure you don't cross any legal lines. Everything you do will be documented and authorized. What about my team? Marcus asked. My deployment schedule? You're being temporarily assigned to a training cadre here at Little Creek, the Admiral said. Officially, you're recovering from the stress of the incident and helping train the next generation. Unofficially, you'll be working this operation. Marcus weighed the risks. Undercover work was different from direct action missions. It required patience, acting ability, and constant vigilance. One mistake could mean death, and not the quick death of combat, but the slow, brutal death that criminal organizations specialized in. I'll need to review all the intelligence on Kozlov, Marcus said. Everything you have. I also want to choose my own backup team for my squadron. Negative on the backup team, the Admiral said firmly. This needs to be completely compartmentalized. Only the people in this room and your NCIS handler will know the true nature of your assignment. Even your commanding officer will believe the cover story. That's a lot of exposure with minimal support, Marcus observed, which is why we're only asking, not ordering, Admiral Mitchell said. This is voluntary, Thompson. High risk, potentially high reward. If you can get inside Kozlov's organization, we could dismantle their entire East Coast operation. Marcus stood, squaring his shoulders. When do I start? Agent Blackwood smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Your handler will contact you within 24 hours. In the meantime, we need you to handle the legal proceedings from the attack as normally as possible. Show up to court, give your statements, but start displaying signs of stress and financial concern. Subtle signs, Johnson emphasized. Kozlov's people aren't stupid. If you suddenly start acting like a movie villain, they'll smell the trap. This needs to develop organically over weeks, maybe months. The meeting continued for another hour, covering communication protocols, emergency procedures, and legal boundaries. Marcus would essentially be living a double life, maintaining his Navy career while secretly building a criminal persona that might attract Kozlov's attention. As he left the Admiral's office, Marcus felt the weight of what he had agreed to. He had operated behind enemy lines before, but always with a clear mission and extraction plan. This was different, a slow infiltration into a criminal world where trust was earned through illegal acts and loyalty was enforced through violence. His phone buzzed as he reached his car. A text from an unknown number. Your groceries were ruined. Perhaps we can compensate you for the inconvenience. Marcus stared at the message, his pulse quickening. It had to be from Kozlov's people. No one else would reference the groceries from the night of the attack. They were already making contact, testing the waters. He screenshotted the message and forwarded it to the secure number Agent Blackwood had provided. The response came quickly. Don't reply yet. Let them sweat. Your handler will guide you on next steps. Driving back to his apartment, Marcus noticed the security detail was less obvious today. Either they had gotten better at surveillance or been pulled back to avoid spooking Kozlov's watchers. The game had already begun, and every move now mattered. His apartment felt different knowing it might be under surveillance. Marcus went through his normal routine, workout, shower, meal prep, while being conscious that hidden eyes might be watching. He needed to project normalcy with subtle signs of stress, a delicate balance that would require constant attention. That evening, his doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in professional attire holding a briefcase. She looked like a lawyer or insurance agent, completely non-threatening. Marcus opened the door, cautiously. Mr. Thompson? I'm Diana Chun from Coastal Legal Services. I understand you were involved in an incident 2 nights ago. I'd like to discuss representation options with you. Her credentials looked legitimate, but Marcus had been briefed to expect contact attempts in various forms. I already have a lawyer, he said. I understand, Diana smiled. But perhaps you'd be interested in exploring civil litigation against your attackers? There could be significant financial compensation available. There was the financial angle. Marcus let a flicker of interest cross his face before masking it. I haven't thought about suing them. Didn't figure they had any money. You'd be surprised, Diana said, handing him a business card. The individuals themselves may not have assets, but their associates might be willing to settle to avoid publicity. My firm works on contingency. You wouldn't pay anything unless we recover damages. Marcus took the card, noting the quality of the printing and the downtown address. This was either an incredibly opportunistic lawyer or Kozlov's first real approach. I'll think about it, he said. Please do. A man with your skills shouldn't have to worry about grocery money. She smiled again and left. The reference to groceries again, too specific to be coincidence. Marcus photographed the business card and sent it to his NCIS contact. Within minutes, his secure phone rang. Agent Blackwood. Good catch. That firm is legitimate but has represented Kozlov interests in the past. They're feeling you out, seeing if you'll bite at easy money. How should I play it? Wait 2 days, then call. Sound interested but cautious. Ask about potential settlements, timeline, what you'd have to do. They'll probably want to meet in person. That's when they'll make their real pitch. Marcus spent the rest of the evening researching the law firm online. They had a professional website, legitimate cases, but a pattern emerged. They often represented victims of crimes connected to organized crime figures, arranging settlements that benefited both parties and kept details out of court. His regular phone rang, his teammate Jake checking in. Heard you had some excitement the other night. You go, brother. Yeah, just some idiots trying to jack my truck. Nothing I couldn't handle. Still, man, on home soil. That's messed up. Let me know if you need anything. Marcus appreciated the call, but couldn't share the truth with his teammate. The isolation of undercover work was already setting in. He had operated in hostile territory before, but always with his team knowing where he was and ready to extract him if necessary. Now he was alone, surrounded by friendly faces he couldn't trust with the truth. The next morning brought a new complication. The local news ran a segment on the attack, complete with security footage showing the fight. Marcus's face was blurred, but anyone who knew him would recognize his build and movement patterns. The reporter emphasized how one man had defeated 3 armed attackers, speculating about military training. His phone immediately lit up with calls and texts from friends and family. Marcus gave the same story to everyone. Wrong place, wrong time, lucky that his training kicked in. He downplayed his skills, attributing the victory to the attacker's incompetence rather than his own abilities. But to Diana Chen's law firm, he would need to tell a different story. He would need to hint at financial pressures, frustration with Navy life, openness to opportunities. It was like preparing for a mission, except instead of studying target buildings and guard patterns, he was crafting a persona that would attract criminals while maintaining enough truth to be believable. His NCIS handler finally made contact that afternoon. Agent Maria Rodriguez introduced herself as his financial advisor, meeting him at a coffee shop near the base. She was younger than he expected, early 30s, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been fully briefed on your situation," she said quietly, sliding a folder across the table. "Inside is a backstory we've prepared. Gambling debts to legitimate casinos that we've arranged documentation for. Some bad investments, credit card debt. Nothing too dramatic, just enough financial pressure to make you vulnerable." Marcus reviewed the documents. They had created a convincing paper trail of poor financial decisions over the past year, coinciding with his deployments. How deep does this go? Deep enough to pass any background check Kozlov might run. The casino debts are real. We've arranged for markers to be issued in your name, though the money went into an FBI account. As far as anyone checking would know, you owe $40,000 to various gambling establishments. And if Kozlov's people offer to pay these debts, we string them along. Make it seem like you're grateful, but cautious. The goal is to get you inside their organization, not just take a quick payoff. They need to believe you could be a long-term asset. Rodriguez explained the legal boundaries carefully. Marcus could not commit any actual crimes, couldn't facilitate real criminal activity, and had to document every interaction. He would wear recording devices when possible, though they both knew Kozlov's people would scan for bugs during any serious meetings. "The most dangerous moment will be when they test you," Rodriguez warned. "They'll ask you to do something illegal to prove your commitment. We'll try to anticipate and have controlled scenarios ready, but you'll need to think fast if they throw something unexpected." Marcus nodded. He had conducted similar tests on potential assets in Afghanistan, asking them to provide minor intelligence to prove their loyalty before trusting them with important missions. Kozlov would do the same, but the stakes would be his life, not just mission success. That evening, Marcus called his parents in Texas. They had seen the news coverage and were worried. He assured them he was fine, listening to his mother fret about the dangers of military life while his father asked tactical questions about the fight. Neither of them knew their son was a SEAL. As far as they knew, he was a regular Navy diver. "Maybe it's time to think about getting out," his mother suggested. "You've served your country. You could come home, use your GI benefits for school, get a normal job." "I've been thinking about that," Marcus said, laying groundwork for his cover story. "The pay isn't great, and this thing the other night, it made me realize how vulnerable I am." His father, the Vietnam veteran, was quiet for a moment. "Son, whatever you're really doing, be careful. And remember, once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them." Marcus wondered if his father suspected more than he let on. The old man had seen enough in Vietnam to recognize when stories didn't quite add up. But he also knew not to ask questions when operational security was involved. 2 days passed before Marcus made the call to Diana Chen's law firm. He tried to sound interested, but wary, like a man considering options he wasn't entirely comfortable with. The receptionist put him through immediately. They had been expecting his call. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so glad you called," Diana said warmly. "I've been reviewing your case, and I think we have excellent grounds for a civil suit. When can you come in to discuss the details?" They scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon. Marcus spent the evening with Rodriguez, preparing for various scenarios. They practiced his gambling problem story, refined details about his financial pressures, and discussed how to react if the meeting turned into something more than legal consultation. The law firm's offices were in a gleaming downtown high-rise, all marble and glass designed to impress. Marcus wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a button-down that made him look like what he was pretending to be, a military man uncomfortable in civilian settings. Diana Chen met him in a conference room with a view of the harbor. Another man was present, introduced as Michael Volkov, Victor's nephew, though that connection wasn't mentioned. He was smooth, early 40s, with expensive clothes and cold eyes that reminded Marcus of insurgent leaders he had hunted. "Mr. Thompson," Michael said, shaking hands with practiced warmth. "I've heard about your situation. Very unfortunate. Men like those who attack you are a plague on our community." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, Kozlov's own people condemning Kozlov's own people. But he played along, accepting coffee and settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than he made in a month. Diana began with standard legal talk about civil suits and damages, but Marcus could tell it was just preamble. The real conversation started when Michael leaned forward. You know, Mr. Thompson, a man with your skills shouldn't have to worry about money. The private sector values what you can do far more than the government does. I've thought about that, Marcus admitted. But my contract isn't up for another 2 years. Contracts can be flexible, Michael suggested, especially when better opportunities arise. I know people who are always looking for men with specialized training. Security work, consulting, training services. All perfectly legal, of course. Of course, Marcus echoed. What kind of pay are we talking about? Michael smiled. Significantly more than Navy pay. We're talking 6 figures to start, with bonuses based on performance. And, unlike military service, the risk would be minimal. Corporate security, executive protection. Using your skills without putting your life on the line. It was a good pitch, one that might tempt a sailor struggling with debt. Marcus let himself appear interested, asking follow-up questions about the work while being careful not to seem too eager. Rodriguez had emphasized the importance of the slow burn, appearing to be gradually seduced rather than jumping at the opportunity. I need to know more about the companies involved, Marcus said. I can't risk my clearance or my honorable discharge on something shady. Absolutely understandable, Diana interjected. Everything would be completely above board. In fact, why don't we arrange for you to meet some of our clients? You could see the operations firsthand, talk to other former military personnel who've made the transition. Michael produced a business card. My private number. When you're ready to explore this further, give me a call. In the meantime, Diana will proceed with the civil suit against your attackers. Consider any settlement a signing bonus for your future career. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises to be in touch. Marcus maintained his composure until he was back in his truck, then immediately called Rodriguez. They're moving faster than we expected, she said after hearing his debrief. Michael Volkov doesn't usually handle recruitment personally. They must be very interested in you. Or very suspicious, Marcus countered. This could be an elaborate test to see if I'm working with law enforcement. Possible. We'll need to be extremely careful with the next steps. Take a week before calling him. In the meantime, we'll build up your gambling presence at the casinos. Make sure you're seen looking stressed about money. Marcus spent the following days living his double life. Days were spent at the base, training junior SEALs in close-quarters combat and water operations. Evenings were spent at Virginia Beach casinos, pretending to chase losses at poker tables while NCIS agents posing as fellow gamblers watched his back. The stress was unlike anything he had experienced in combat. In war zones, the enemy was clear, the mission defined. Here, everyone was potentially friend or foe. Every conversation could be a test, every friendly face a possible threat. He found himself checking for surveillance constantly, noting license plates, memorizing faces and crowds. A week after the law firm meeting, Marcus sat in his apartment staring at Michael Volkov's business card. The number he was about to dial could lead to the dismantling of a major criminal organization, or it could lead to a shallow grave if his cover was blown. There was no backup team waiting to extract him, no air support on standby. Just him, his training, and the thin protection of being a federal asset. He thought about the Admiral's words. Kozlov's organization had corrupted military personnel, supplied weapons to America's enemies, trafficked in human misery. Taking them down would save lives, both military and civilian. It was a mission worth the risk, even if it meant operating alone in the shadows between his two worlds. Marcus dialed the number. It rang twice before Michael answered. I've been thinking about our conversation, Marcus said. I'd like to learn more about those opportunities you mentioned. Excellent, Michael replied, and Marcus could hear the satisfaction in his voice. How about dinner tomorrow night? I know a place where we can talk privately. As they arranged the details, Marcus felt the familiar calm that came before an operation. The mission was truly beginning now. He would walk into the enemy's den armed only with his wits and the legend NCIS had created. Every decision from this point could mean the difference between success and disaster. But this was what he had trained for, what SEALs did, accomplish the impossible in impossible circumstances. The battlefield had just shifted from foreign shores to American streets, from uniformed enemies to criminals in expensive suits. The tactics were different, but the objective remained the same: complete the mission and come home alive. The restaurant Michael Volkov had chosen was exactly what Marcus expected: upscale, discreet, with private dining rooms and staff who knew not to remember faces. Marcus arrived wearing his best civilian clothes, still modest by the restaurant standards, but appropriate for a military man trying to impress. Michael was waiting in a private booth, accompanied by two men who were obviously security. They were professionals. Marcus could tell by their positioning and the way they assessed him as he approached. One stood as Marcus neared, conducting a quick but thorough pat-down. "Forgive the precaution," Michael said smoothly. "In my business, one can never be too careful." Marcus submitted to the search without complaint, noting they used a radio frequency detector as well. He was clean. Rodriguez had warned him against wearing any recording devices to this first dinner. Trust had to be established before they could risk surveillance equipment. "Understand completely," Marcus said, taking his seat. "In my line of work, security is paramount too." Michael ordered wine, something French and expensive that Marcus pretended to appreciate. They made small talk through the appetizers, discussing the weather, local sports, anything but the real reason for their meeting. It was a dance Marcus recognized from intelligence gatherings in Afghanistan. Feeling each other out, looking for signs of deception or weakness. "Tell me about your Navy career," Michael finally said over the main course. "Diana mentioned you have specialized training." Marcus had rehearsed this carefully with Rodriguez. Enough truth to be verifiable, enough vagueness to be intriguing. "I'm a diver," he said. "Underwater demolitions, salvage operations, occasional security work for high-value maritime assets. But more than just a regular diver, I think," Michael pressed. "The way you handled those three men suggests more extensive training." Marcus allowed a small smile. "Let's just say the Navy invests heavily in some of us. Close quarters combat, small unit tactics, language training. I've operated in places that don't officially exist, doing things that never happened." It was the perfect balance, hinting at special operations without explicitly claiming to be a SEAL. Michael's eyes lit up with interest, exactly as the psychological profile had predicted. The man was fascinated by American special operations, and here was a potential recruit dancing around classified details. "And yet they pay you, what, $50,000 a year?" Michael shook his head. "Criminal, really. Men like you risk everything for your country and can barely afford a decent car." $43,000, actually, Marcus corrected, before taxes. And that's with hazard pay and sea pay included. "Ridiculous. I pay my bodyguards twice that, and they've never been shot at." Michael refilled Marcus's wine glass. "Tell me, what do you know about private military contracting?" They discussed the legitimate side of military contracting for a while. Companies Marcus knew that provided security in Iraq and Afghanistan, the pay scales, the lifestyle. Michael was well-informed, dropping names and details that showed he had done his homework or had other military sources. "The thing is," Michael said eventually, "traditional contracting still puts you in harm's way. What I'm proposing is different. Using your skills in a safer, more profitable environment, such as training primarily. I have associates who need to learn what you know. Close protection techniques, surveillance detection, tactical driving. Nothing that would violate your oath or compromise national security, just basic skills that any good security professional should have." Marcus pretended to consider this. "Training isn't illegal, depending on who I'm training and what I'm teaching them." "Exactly. Businessmen who need protection in dangerous parts of the world. Security teams for legitimate companies operating in challenging environments. All above board, all legal, just very well compensated." The waiter cleared their plates, and Michael ordered cognac. When they were alone again, he leaned forward slightly. "I understand you have some financial pressures. Gambling can be an expensive hobby." Marcus tensed, playing the part of a man whose secret had been exposed. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know about potential associates," Michael said calmly. "It's nothing to be ashamed of. Many military men struggle with the transition to civilian life, seek excitement in the wrong places. The important thing is finding solutions. The debts are significant, Marcus admitted, looking down at his drink. 40,000 to various casinos, another 15 in credit cards, Michael recited, plus your car loan and normal expenses. Difficult to manage on a military salary. Marcus was impressed despite himself. They had done their research thoroughly, finding the paper trail NCIS had created. I've been trying to dig myself out, but the interest keeps piling up. What if I told you that your debts could disappear overnight? Michael asked. Consider it an advance on future earnings. You help train my people, provide some consultation on security matters, and we make your financial problems go away. That's a generous offer, Marcus said carefully. Maybe too generous. What's the catch? Michael laughed. Suspicious mind, I like that. The catch is that once you're in, you're in. This isn't a one-time gig. We're building something here, and we need reliable people. Men we can trust, who can trust us in return. And if I decide it's not for me, then you walk away, no hard feelings. Though I think you'll find the compensation and lifestyle addictive in the best way. Michael signaled for the check. Think about it. Talk to your lawyer about your discharge options. When you're ready to take the next step, call me. One of Michael's security men stepped forward with an envelope. Michael slid it across the table to Marcus. A gesture of good faith. $5,000. Consider it a consultation fee for tonight's discussion. Marcus stared at the envelope, letting conflict play across his face. Taking the money would be a crucial step in establishing his corrupt persona, but it had to seem like a difficult decision. After a long moment, he picked up the envelope and slipped it into his jacket. I'll think about your offer, he said. Michael smiled like a fisherman who had just set the hook. I'm confident you'll make the right decision. Oh, and Marcus? That situation with the 3 idiots who attacked you. We're handling that. They've been disciplined for acting without authorization. You won't have any more trouble from that direction. The admission was stunning. Michael had just confirmed the attackers worked for his organization and that the attack hadn't been sanctioned. Marcus filed this information away while maintaining his poker face. The drive back to his apartment was tense. Marcus constantly checked his mirrors, aware that Volkov's people were probably following him. The envelope of cash felt like it was burning through his jacket. It was evidence, but also a symbol of the line he was crossing. Rodriguez was waiting in his apartment when he arrived, having entered through the back while he was at dinner. How did it go? Marcus handed her the envelope and recounted the entire conversation. She listened while photographing the bills and recording their serial numbers. Taking the money was the right move, she assured him. It establishes the relationship and gives us evidence of their attempt to corrupt a federal employee. What's your read on Michael? Smart, careful, but confident. He thinks he's recruiting a desperate sailor with useful skills. The mention of training concerns me. They might want me to teach tactics that could be used against law enforcement. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, you need to be seen spending some of this money. Pay down a credit card tomorrow. Make it look like you're using their cash to handle debts. It'll reinforce the narrative. They spent another hour discussing next steps. Marcus would need to start the process of early discharge from the Navy, or at least appear to. Rodriguez would coordinate with Navy Legal to create a paper trail showing disciplinary issues and a mutual agreement to separate. This is moving fast, Rodriguez warned. Usually these operations take months of development. They're either desperate for someone with your skills, or this is an elaborate test. Stay sharp. After she left, Marcus sat in his dark apartment thinking about the path ahead. He had been undercover before, but always in foreign countries where the enemy was clear. Here, he was pretending to betray everything he stood for, and the act was disturbing even though he knew it was pretense. His secure phone buzzed. Admiral Mitchell, heard you made contact. Remember, thousands of lives could be saved by stopping their weapons pipeline. Stay the course. The reminder helped. This wasn't about Marcus or his feelings. It was about preventing weapons from reaching terrorists, stopping human trafficking, protecting other service members from corruption. The mission was righteous, even if the methods were distasteful. The next morning, Marcus reported to the base, as usual. He went through the motions of training junior sailors, but his mind was elsewhere. During lunch, he made a show of calling credit card companies, discussing payment plans loud enough for others to overhear. The gossip mill would spread the word that Thompson was having money troubles. His commanding officer, Commander Lisa Walsh, called him in that afternoon. She had been briefed on the cover story, but not the true mission. As far as she knew, one of her SEALs was genuinely struggling. "Thompson, I've been hearing concerning things," she said, her expression stern. "Financial difficulties, distraction during training, and now I'm told you've been inquiring about early separation?" "Ma'am," Marcus let shame color his voice. "It's been a difficult few months. The incident last week, some personal issues. I'm handling it. Are you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're spiraling. You're one of my best operators, but if you can't maintain focus and resolve your issues, we need to discuss options." The conversation was perfectly crafted to support his cover story. Anyone checking would find a SEAL with financial problems whose commander was losing faith in him. It hurt to play this role, to appear weak in front of an officer he respected, but it was necessary. That evening, Marcus visited one of the casinos, making sure to be seen paying off markers with cash. The casino staff, briefed by NCIS, played along perfectly, treating him like a problem gambler who had finally caught a break. Other patrons noticed too. Word would spread through the gambling community that Thompson had found money somewhere. 3 days passed before Marcus called Michael again. He had spent the time perfecting his conflicted persona, a good soldier tempted by easy money, struggling with the decision to cross ethical lines. Rodriguez coached him through phone calls, helping him find the right balance of eagerness and reluctance. "I've been thinking about your offer," Marcus said when Michael answered. "I'm interested, but I need to know more about what you'd expect from me." "Naturally. Why don't you come by my office tomorrow? We can discuss specifics in a more professional setting." The office was in an industrial area, a nondescript building that could have housed any business. But Marcus noticed the subtle security, cameras, reinforced doors, windows that were likely bulletproof. This was more than a simple business front. Inside, the decoration was expensive but tasteless, all black leather and chrome. Michael's office had a wall of security monitors showing various angles of the building and surrounding area. Marcus counted at least 12 armed men throughout the facility. "Welcome to Prometheus Security Solutions," Michael said, gesturing to a chair. "Officially, we're a consulting firm specializing in corporate security. Unofficially, we provide more comprehensive services to select clients." He showed Marcus around the facility, a training room with mats and heavy bags, a classroom set up with whiteboards covered in tactical diagrams, an armory that was technically legal but extensive enough to outfit a small army. Everything was just inside the law, but clearly capable of supporting less legitimate activities. "Your initial role would be training," Michael explained. "Basic close protection, counter-surveillance, defensive tactics. Nothing you haven't taught Navy personnel, just with better pay and more grateful students." "Who exactly would I be training?" "Private security contractors headed for overseas assignments. Bodyguards for executives operating in dangerous markets. All legitimate professionals who need the kind of edge your experience can provide." It sounded reasonable on the surface, but Marcus could read between the lines. These security contractors were likely Kozlov muscle being trained for criminal operations. The executives were probably drug dealers and human traffickers needing protection from rivals and law enforcement. "What about my Navy commitment?" Marcus asked. "I've got 2 years left on my contract." Michael waved dismissively. "We have lawyers who specialize in military separations. Psychological stress from the attack, financial hardship creating security concerns, performance issues. There are many paths to an honorable discharge when properly presented." They discussed salary, 6 figures to start, cash bonuses for special projects, a company car, even health insurance. It was a package designed to dazzle someone making military wages. Marcus negotiated half-heartedly, accepting terms that were generous but not suspiciously so. "There's one thing," Michael said as they concluded. "We need to know we can trust you. Nothing major, just a small demonstration of commitment." Here it was, the test Rodriguez had warned about. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "What kind of demonstration?" "We have a client who needs some items transported from Virginia to Florida. Nothing illegal, Just some electronics that we prefer to keep off commercial carriers. You drive them down, make the delivery, collect payment. Easy money, $5,000 for 2 days' work. Marcus pretended to think it over, though every instinct screamed danger. Transporting unknown packages for criminal organizations was how people ended up serving federal time. But refusing would end his infiltration before it began. "I need to see what I'm transporting," he said finally. "I'm not risking my freedom for anyone." Michael smiled approvingly. "Smart man. Of course you can inspect everything. Like I said, nothing illegal. Just sensitive equipment we'd rather keep discreet." They shook on it, and Marcus left with another envelope. This one containing detailed instructions for the transportation job. As soon as he was clear of the building, he called Rodriguez for an emergency meeting. "They want me to be a mule," he said, showing her the instructions. "Pick up packages in Norfolk, drive to Miami, deliver to a warehouse address." Rodriguez studied the information. "This is sooner than expected. They usually take weeks before the first test. Either they're very confident in their assessment of you, or this is a trap. So what do? We control the scenario. I'll get a team on this tonight. We'll intercept whatever they plan to have you transport, replace it with harmless materials, and document everything. You'll make the run, but you'll be carrying nothing illegal. And if they have people watching, if they check the packages en route, then we'll have backup ready to extract you. This is risky, but it's also an opportunity. If you pass their test, you'll be inside their organization with credibility. That's worth the risk." Marcus wasn't so sure, but he trusted the process. Over the next 2 days, NCIS worked frantically to identify and intercept the real shipment while preparing an identical but harmless replacement. Marcus continued his normal routine, showing just enough stress to be believable while preparing for what could be a one-way trip. The pickup was scheduled for Friday night at a warehouse in Norfolk. Marcus arrived in his personal vehicle, having refused their offer of a rental car. He wanted some control over the situation. The warehouse was dark except for a single loading dock where 2 men waited with several aluminum cases. "You Thompson?" one asked. He was young, nervous, clearly low-level muscle. "Yeah, these the packages." "Yeah, boss says you can check them if you want, but don't take too long. We don't like being exposed here." Marcus opened each case, finding what appeared to be computer servers and electronic components. He photographed everything with his phone, ostensibly documenting what he was carrying, but actually creating evidence. The equipment looked legitimate, though he suspected the original shipment had been something far more sinister. "Looks fine," he said, loading the cases into his truck. "Miami Warehouse District, right?" "Yeah, you got the address. Should take you about 12 hours with stops. Don't speed, don't get pulled over, don't open the cases again." "Questions?" "Just one. What happens if something goes wrong?" The nervous kid tried to look tough. "Nothing goes wrong if you do your job. But if it does, you're on your own. We don't know you. Never heard of you." Marcus nodded and drove away, watching his mirrors carefully. He spotted the surveillance within minutes, a sedan following at a discreet distance. They were watching to make sure he followed instructions. He drove normally, stopping for gas and food at appropriate intervals, always aware of the tail. The drive south was surreal. Here he was, a Navy SEAL pretending to be a criminal transporter, carrying fake contraband while real criminals watched his every move. He thought about all the actual drug mules making similar runs, unaware they were pawns in larger games, facing years in prison for a few $1,000s. Rodriguez had arranged for surveillance teams to track him without being noticed by Kozlov's people. They changed out regularly, invisible guardian angels ensuring his safety. At one point, his secure phone showed a text, 2 cars following. "We have eyes on all. Continue as planned." He stopped for the night at a motel in South Carolina, carrying the cases into his room as instructed. The criminal surveillance team parked across the street, watching. Marcus wondered if they would attempt to enter his room, check the packages, but the night passed quietly. The next morning, he continued south through Georgia and into Florida. The landscape changed from pine forest to palm trees, the air growing humid and heavy. His followers stayed with him, rotating vehicles but maintaining constant surveillance. The Miami warehouse was in an industrial area that had seen better days. Marcus arrived at sunset, the golden light making even the grimy buildings look almost attractive. Two different men were waiting, these ones clearly more senior in the organization. "Any problems?" one asked, checking the cases. "None. Smooth sailing all the way." They opened each case, inspecting the contents with devices Marcus didn't recognize. Whatever NCIS had substituted passed their tests, because they nodded with satisfaction and handed him an envelope. 5,000 as agreed. Mr. Volkov is pleased. He'll be in touch about permanent arrangements. Marcus took the money and left, driving to a hotel Rodriguez had designated for debriefing. She was waiting in the parking lot, her relief visible when he arrived safely. "Outstanding work," she said as they sat in her vehicle. "We tracked the entire route, documented everyone involved. The original shipment was weapons, military-grade equipment stolen from a National Guard armory. You just helped us identify a major trafficking route. What happens now? Now you're trusted. You pass their test, prove you can follow instructions, and keep quiet. When Michael calls, you'll accept the permanent position. We're building a case that will take down their entire network, and you just became our key asset inside." Marcus stared out at the Miami skyline, processing the reality of his new life. He had crossed the line, even if it was pretend. In the eyes of Kozlov's organization, he was now a corrupt SEAL willing to break the law for money. It was a necessary fiction, but it still felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. His phone rang. Michael Volkov. "I heard the delivery went perfectly," Michael said. "I think it's time we made your arrangement more permanent. How soon can you be back in Virginia?" "I can fly back tonight," Marcus replied. "Excellent. Come by the office Monday morning. We'll have papers ready for your Navy separation and your new employment contract. Welcome to the private sector, Marcus." As the call ended, Marcus felt the weight of commitment settling on his shoulders. He was in now, trusted by criminals who thought he was one of them. The real mission was just beginning, and the stakes would only get higher. Rodriguez drove him to the airport, briefing him on next steps during the ride. "Once you're officially employed by them, we'll need regular intelligence reports. We'll set up dead drops, secure communication channels. You'll need to document everything without arousing suspicion." "How long do these operations usually last?" Marcus asked. "Months, sometimes years. However long it takes to build an ironclad case. You'll need to be patient, play the long game. Can you handle that?" Marcus thought about his SEAL training, about missions that required weeks of preparation for minutes of action. Patience was part of the job, even if this was a different kind of patience. "I can handle it," he said. But as he boarded the plane back to Virginia, Marcus wondered if that was true. Living a lie for months, pretending to betray his country, associating with people who represented everything he had sworn to fight against, it would test him in ways combat never had. The plane lifted off, Miami disappearing beneath clouds. Somewhere below, the real weapons shipment was being tracked and would eventually lead to arrests. Lives would be saved because of his actions today. That had to be enough to sustain him through whatever came next. His reflection in the window looked tired, older than his years. The clean-cut sailor who had walked out of a grocery store just weeks ago was transforming into someone else. Someone who could walk in the shadows between law and crime. Someone who could gain the trust of dangerous men while secretly working to destroy them. The mission required him to become someone he despised, to speak words that burned his throat, to accept blood money with a grateful smile. But every lie, every betrayal of his true self, would help dismantle an organization that profited from human misery. As Virginia's coast appeared on the horizon, Marcus Thompson, Navy SEAL, prepared to disappear completely into his cover identity. The man who would walk into Prometheus Security Solutions on Monday would be someone else. A corrupt soldier seduced by easy money, a man willing to sell his skills to the highest bidder. The transformation was necessary, but Marcus promised himself he would not lose sight of who he really was. Somewhere beneath the lies and pretense, the warrior remained, waiting for the moment when a mission would end and he could reclaim his honor. But that moment was months away, perhaps years. Until then, he would walk among wolves, speaking their language, earning their trust, all while gathering the evidence that would ultimately destroy them. It was the kind of mission that broke some men, but Marcus had been forged in harsher fires. The plane descended toward Norfolk, carrying him back to a life of deception in service of a greater truth. Tomorrow, the real work would begin.